So welcome back to lesson 4. We've done a lot so far. We have a character, we have orbs we can collect, we have a timer going, we have an end game scenario, so we need an end screen now. I told you in the last lesson, we were going to originally create a whole new scene for the end scene. I thought that was a little not necessary, so we're just going to do an end screen pop-up, another UI element. It's simpler, so let's get started. First thing we gotta do is actually give the game a real end game scenario instead of just a log. So open up the exit script, and inside the onTrigger enter, inside the if statement, we're going to get rid of the log, and you're going to type GameManager.instance.endGame, and that will call endGame and end the game when we get to that area. Now go to Game Manager. And inside Game Manager, we're going to write some logic for the end screen canvas pop-up. We haven't created the canvas yet. We'll do that after this. Let's get the script out of the way for it. So underneath, say, is timer running? It's a good spot. Underneath that, we're going to write public game object end screen canvas. That's going to give us access to the canvas. Then public text mesh pro u GUI time text like we did before. And then public text mesh pro u GUI orbs text. And we want the text and the timer for the end screen because then we want to display it. So we're going to go down to end game inside of Game Manager, and we're going to write a pause basically on the time scale. It's going to slow down the time to pause the game basically. So we write time.timescale equals 0. And then we want to show the screen. We want to show the end screen, the canvas that we're going to create when we end the game. So we write end screen canvas dot set active true. So we're going to set it as true. Basically activate the object. By default, it will be marked as false or be inactive. So underneath that, we're going to update the end screen with the results or with the amount of orbs collected and the time it took. So we write time text dot text equals $ quotes time colon and then squiggly brackets, elapsed time, F2. And then under that, we write orbs text.text equals $ quotes, orbs collected, colon. Then we want the amount of orbs collected over the total orbs collected, right? So we do squiggly brackets, collected orbs, close that, slash, squiggly brackets, total orbs, squiggly brackets, quotes. So we want to give the player also the ability to either play again or quit, right? You don't want to just go to the end screen and then you can't do anything or you have to close out of the application. You want to be able to play again or quit. So next we're going to write a public void play again, and inside that we're going to write time.timescale equals 1. Underneath that we're going to write Unity Engine dot scene management dot scene manager dot load scene parentheses Unity Engine dot scene management dot scene manager dot get active scene parentheses dot name. So that's basically just going to reload the current scene. So next thing we need to write is public void quit game, and inside of that we're going to write application dot quit, and that will quit us out of the application once we build it. When we're in the Unity editor, it won't do anything. So save that and go back to Unity editor. Looks like we have an error. So if you notice, it's on line 17. Looks like instead of the X, I wrote a C in text mesh. Place that, and that should fix the error. Okay, one more thing we have to do is we need to go to the UI manager and we need to delete the show end screen function that we wrote earlier that was going to create or show the new scene. We don't need that anymore with our new canvas. Okay, so next thing we need to do is create the scene pop-up or the end screen pop-up. So go to the hierarchy, right click, select UI, and select canvas like we did before. Rename it end screen canvas. We're going to adjust the scale of the window. So like we did before, select UI scale mode and then select scale with screen size and change it to 1920 by 1080. Inside the canvas, we're going to right click and select panel. This will be a background, a default background. And if you want to get creative, you can put a picture back there or some background or overlay or something. Right now, we're just going to use a color. We're going to turn it to a black and then change the opacity to almost not transparent. So it's pretty dark. This will give a clear indication that something has happened in the game that is not the normal screen. So inside the panel or the canvas, you can right click and we're going to add some text. So we need text for the game over, for the timer and for the orbs collected. And then we'll also need 2 buttons, one for play again and one for quit game. For the buttons, you just right click the canvas, go to UI, and then go down to button, Text Mesh Pro. So now we have all the necessary elements for the end screen. You can rename them appropriately to quit, play again, orb text, timer text, and title text. So select title text, we're going to adjust the position, move it up to the top of the screen, update the text to game over, change the font size to something like 100, and we'll adjust the size of the text window to about 600. Before we adjust the other elements, let's get the game manager script going a little bit. Let's get some logic on this. We'll go back and finish editing the placement of the other elements. So go into Game Manager, and now, before in Game Manager, all we had was total orbs. But now with the new code, we have end screen canvas, time text, and orbs text, part of that Game Manager script. So we need to tell Game Manager what those need to be. So the time text should be the timer text, the orbs text should be the orbs text in the end screen canvas, and the end screen canvas should be the end screen canvas. This tells the game manager to activate or deactivate the end screen canvas and what inputs should be displayed or what data should be displayed for the time text and the orbs text. So we will deactivate that, so it's deactivated by default. So when you start the game, there's not an end screen up on the screen, and goal is the game manager will activate it. So we'll quickly run through the maze. Okay, so we're just about there, and we see time 117. That matches the time in the top left corner. We see the other elements have populated also. Now if you notice, the mouse still moves the camera around and everything. And none of the buttons work because we haven't done the right functionality for those yet either. But the basic outline of the end screen works. So let's do a little bit more aligning and formatting for the end screen so we can test it better in the future. So select timer text, update the text for it for time 0.00 like we did for the other one. Adjust the size to about 50, adjust the width to about 400. You can center it and center the title that we didn't center before. So you can play around with how you want to format the screen. This is just what I liked at first. Next, we want to adjust the orbs text. So we want to write orbs collected 0 out of 15. Change the font to 50 and change the width of the orbs box to 600. Adjust the location. Next, the play again button. Select play again and hit the drop down arrow, which will give you access to the text. So that's where you update the text for the play again button. So update the text input and write play again. You might not see the update since the other button, the quit button, is overlaying on the play again button. Do the same for quit. Open the text, type in quit, go back to play again. We're going to adjust the position so we can actually see it. We're going to go to quit and just adjust the position there. Now don't adjust the text position, adjust the overall object position of quit and play again. Next, we're going to adjust the size of the buttons. So quit, we make the width 300 and the height 90. We're going to do the same measurements for play again. So width 300 and height 90. And save that. So we have to write a little bit more logic for the end screen to work out. We have to lock some elements from the player so we don't have controls anymore. So inside Game Manager, go to the end game function, and at the bottom of it, write cursor dot lock state equals cursor lock mode dot none semicolon, and then below that write cursor dot visible equals true. So this unlocks the cursor and shows it visible. We will actually see the mouse cursor. In game, we don't see the mouse cursor. So by default, we don't have to worry about this. But when we play again, the mouse cursor will now be unlocked and visible. So we want to lock it again and make it invisible if the player selects play again. We don't want the mouse cursor on screen. Now we have to tell Unity what we want. So inside play again, we write cursor.lockState equals cursor.lockMode.locked semicolon, and then we write cursor.visible equals false. That hides the cursor again when we hit play again. Okay, so let's deactivate the end screen again, and let's test this out. We'll run through the maze quickly. Okay, so we hit the end. We can see the cursor now is visible, but the camera is still moving, so we have to address that. We have not addressed that yet. I am doing it this way where we don't do it all at once is because you shouldn't do functionality all at once. You should do functionality one step at a time. Okay, so we select play again, but it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Well, we didn't actually give the buttons any functionality yet. We have the functions to work, but we're not connecting those to the buttons. So in order to connect them, we need to go to the buttons. We go to play again, and down below on the inspector, you can see on click. So that means when you click the button, do something. So we're going to tell it what the something is to do. Go to play again. In the inspector on the right side, on click, click the plus symbol, and then drag the game manager into the non-object field. This is because this is where the logic for the play again and quit is. So then in the functions, the drop down, we click on it, go to game manager, and select play again. And that is telling Unity that when you click the play again button, call this function, call the play again function. So we're going to do the same thing for quit. So select quit, hit the plus symbol, drag game manager into the object field, select no function, hit the game manager, and then scroll down or select the quit game. This tells Unity when you click the quit game, call the quit game function from the game manager. So save it. So now we need to disable the controls for the player. We don't want them moving or looking around when the end game scene pops up. So in the game manager, towards the top of endgame, we want to disable the player's controls. So in order to do that, we need to type player controller dot get component arrow bracket starter assets dot first person controller close the arrow bracket parentheses dot enabled equals false. So we are using the starter assets first person character controller, right? We're telling Unity to get the component that is on the player that is identified as starter assets, the character controller, first person controller, and mark the enabled section, mark it inactive, mark it disabled. So now the controls, the inputs, WASD won't work anymore when you do that. So now also, when we play again, we need to re-enable those controls, because by default those controls are active. But now that we're deactivating them at the end of the game, we need to reactivate them when we hit play again, because if you hit play again, it does not reset everything from default. You sometimes have to tell Unity what to re-enable if you disable it manually, like we are doing. So in play again, we need to write player controller dot get component arrow brackets starter assets dot first person controller close arrow brackets parentheses dot enabled equals true. And there is a typo, we're going to get errors, and you'll see that we fix them easily, right? So you get an error, you look what line it's on, we switch the V back to the B. And we also had another error for player controller. We never actually declared player controller game object. So back in the game manager at the top, above all the functions, inside the game manager class, we need to write private game object player controller. We're going to go back to the end scene, and we're going to bring the player back there so we don't have to run through the level again. Just the rotation slightly. Okay, so there's actually one more thing I forgot we had to do in order for this to work properly. So we identified the player controller. We need to tell Unity where the player controller is, on what object to identify it with. So inside awake, we need to type player controller equals game object dot find with tag player. This tells Unity that look for the object in game that has a tag of player, and then mark that as the player controller, and then we can use that to get its components. We hit play and we go to the end scene, and we see game over, we see the time, we see the orbs collected, which we didn't collect anything. We hit play again, and we're back to where the player started, so that play again works. We hit quit, and nothing happens. Why? Because we're not in a built game. We're not in a build, so the game won't quit. So let's add a little bit of functionality to this so we actually get some indicator inside our editor so we know the quit button is actually working. You also notice the camera is no longer moving as we move the mouse around in the end screen. So let's go back to the scripts. In the game manager, in the quit game function at the end, we're going to add some if statements. Just give us a little notification when the quit button is actually working so we know it's working. So we're going to type pound or hashtag if unity editor debug.log quit game called, saying the quit function is called application would close in a built version. Else, or hashtag else or pound else, run the application.quit. So that's basically saying if we're in the Unity editor, just print out this statement. But if we're actually in a build and we're not in the Unity editor, run the application.quit, which works in a build. And then after that, write hashtag end if, otherwise it won't work. So we go to the end again, hit play again, still works, should, because we didn't do anything that. We hit quit and we get a statement printed out of the message we put in the script. So one more thing I want to do, if you notice, if we go back to the beginning of the scene view has a glow about it with the orbs, and our game view doesn't have that glow. Well, that's just because we don't have post-processing turned on. So in order to get post-processing turned on, all you have to do is select the main camera object in the hierarchy, and under rendering you see a post-processing checkbox. Just check that on, and there you go. Now you get a glow to the scene. It looks a little bit better. We're not going to cover much post-processing in this game. Later on, maybe I'll go more in depth on that. That's how you really get your games to look good. So one of the last things we're going to do before we wrap this lesson up is we're going to place the rest of the 15 orbs around the scene. It doesn't matter where you place them, just place them anywhere in the maze. Place them in dead ends, all over the maze. Make it hard for the player to find all the orbs. Alright, that's lesson 4 done. So now you have an end screen pop-up, you have all the orbs placed, you have some end game logic, so the game's really coming together now. In lesson 5, we're going to add the main menu and get the game ready to publish. Let's finish strong.